Hey, what's going on? Justin back from Modern Mixing, and today's video number 4 of my 4-part series on compression, dealing with vocals in particular. So today I'm going to be discussing parallel compression when it comes to vocals, and I guess just a quick overview of parallel compression. So regular compression, what we're doing is we're trying to bring the lowest levels of the sound and the highest levels of the sound closer together, but by doing so we're bringing down the peaks. With regular compression, with parallel compression, what we're actually doing is we're not touching the peaks, and we're actually bringing up the lower levels of the sound itself, so it tends to sound a little bit more natural and just more dynamic, so it sounds a little bit more pleasing to the ear. That being said, I use both. I tend to use a little bit of compression on the peaks just to shape them, so I can shape the sound into something. It's like molding clay. You know, you have a lump of clay and you want to mold it into something. You know, you don't just throw another piece of clay at it. You kind of have to mold it first, and then maybe introduce some other forms of textures or whatever. And that's sort of what parallel compression is. It's like an extra texture, but I have to make sure that first texture is molded properly first. So so generally when I'm using parallel compression, there's 3 things that I'm looking for. So the first thing is I'm looking to accentuate the transients. How I usually achieve that is with the attack on the compressor. I generally go for a ballpark between maybe 10 to 30 milliseconds, but sometimes it changes depending on the sound and how much it actually has to be shaped or how little it has to be shaped. The second thing is I'm trying to increase the apparent volume. So by doing that, I typically use a higher ratio, so that when the sound is being compressed, it's being compressed fairly heavily. So the more I can eliminate those peaks as I'm bringing the sound, the parallel sound, up into the original sound, it's raising the apparent volume by bringing up the lowest levels in that sound. So the more I crush it, the more of the lowest levels are going to come up. So it is a balancing act, because you can't completely crush it, and then you can't be too conservative with it either. It has to be, you have to find that happy medium, but you know, you can experiment with that. And the last thing I'm usually trying to achieve is a little bit more body, so a little bit more fullness in the sound. In some cases, like in the example I'm going to show you, I actually had to cut a little bit out on the parallel channel. I don't normally use EQs, but I had to in this particular case because the parallel channel was actually adding a little bit too much body. So in that case, I had to cut it out just to clean it up a little bit. But yeah, so those are generally the 3 things that I'm looking for. So it's not quite as simple as just putting on a compressor and slamming it and, you know, that's it. Here we go, mix it in. You kind of have to have an idea of what you're doing and what you're trying to achieve, and then obviously use the tools that you have to get that sound. And that's about it. So I have my compressor here, so I'll show you the settings. So in this case, I used 1,000 milliseconds, which is the longest that the compressor will allow me to use. And the reason why I did that is to help with the body of the sound. So the longer that the compressor is actually compressing the sound, then the more chances it has of not pumping. So when you're compressing it really hard, what tends to happen is if you use a shorter release, the compressor tends to pump. And in this case, I don't want the compressor to pump, because once I slowly bring it back in with the original vocal, I want the sound to be as consistent as possible, because the original sound is going to do all the dynamic work and not the parallel compressed sound. Then I have an attack. In this case, I use 3 milliseconds. I don't normally go this fast, but in this particular sound, for whatever reason, it needed it. And then my threshold was -25. So that could change, but it just, you know, for whatever reason, it worked well with this. So I'm taking off an average of about 10, you know, maybe 12 peaks, or sorry, 12 decibels. So next I used an equalizer, taking out 200 hertz, about 3.5 dBs, just to take out that little bit of mud in the parallel compression. And then also a limiter to catch those little peaks every so often. It looks a little bit dramatic there, but it's actually not taking off that much. And that's it. So I'll show it to you without it, and I'll show it to you with it, and I'll bring it back in.
I thought that I was the one for her, and maybe I'm crazy. This was no concern back when I
So that's actually not too bad. The only thing is when you're listening to it, your ear is trying to fight with it a little bit. It's just because there's those quiet parts in the vocals when, you know, the dynamics are bouncing up and down. It's those quiet sections in the vocals where you may not be consciously noticing it, but your ear's kind of like trying to fight with it to stay focused on that vocal. So now watch what happens as I bring in this fader with this parallel compression channel.
I thought that I was the one for her, and maybe I'm crazy. This was no concern back when I believed that I was sent to her and thought that she was sent to me.
So it just makes it that much easier for your ear to grab the vocal, and at the same time you're not squishing those peaks or those transients to the point where the sound starts to become unnatural. Like, so you're still being true to that natural sound, but you're still getting that loud apparent volume that most people like to look for in, you know, modern style of music. So anyways, experiment with that, try it. Hopefully this can help aid your you know, your mixes or your productions to, you know, the next level. And you can also use this on other stuff too, drums, whatever you want. It doesn't just have to be on vocals, but this video is specific to vocals and what I look for. But anyways, till next time.